good to go. We are Facebook Live.
Yes, we are.
We have all of our issues worked out. I want to say to the media, thank you for joining us, and you have permission to record this press conference in its entirety. We are recording, and we will be happy to share the full recording after the conclusion of the press conference, if that will be of assistance to you as well. And we are also, as I stated, Facebook Live. I wanted to thank my colleagues on the Police Accountability Task Force for all of the time and service that they have provided in helping us to get to this point. I think it's important to point out that while we are in the midst of a national crisis, in the wake of the murder of George Floyd and the problem and the injustices in the law enforcement system in this country and in this city, it is important to know that this group, this collaborative, has been engaged for the past 7 months because of concerns that we have about justice, the lack of accountability, and the lack of transparency within the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. And it's also important to know that we were on the brink of going public with these concerns when COVID-19 emerged. So timing is everything. We certainly believe in synchronicity, and the time is now for us to bring this important message. So today, we're going to start with, you'll be hearing from me, Gwen Grant, President and CEO of the Urban League of Greater Kansas City. You'll be hearing from Rodney Williams, the President of the Kansas City chapter of the NAACP. And you'll be hearing from Laura McDonald, the Executive Director of MORE2. We will be talking about our concerns, as I stated, about the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. But before, you know what? I should also introduce our task force. Some of them are here with us today. We have Dr. KCPD Hill, who is a Vice Chair of the Urban League Board of Directors and the President of Stonehill Firm. We have Murray Woodard, who is a Program Officer at Kaufman Foundation. Laura McDonald and Rodney Williams, you will meet later. We have Clint Adams, who is an attorney, community activist, and president of Citizens to Abolish Poverty. We have Diane Cleaver, who is the president and CEO of the Urban Neighborhood Initiative. And we have Leslie Smith, who is an attorney. Leslie, job title, baby, I forgot.
Criminal defense attorney.
Okay, and a member of the Jackson County Bar Association. Those are the members who are present with us today. And so now I will move on and get into my comments, my remarks. So I wanna open with a scripture that inspired me as I've been grappling with these very troubling times and these very challenging issues and the pain that I have felt as a mother, as a grandmother, as a community servant, as a citizen of Kansas City, Missouri, in the aftermath of George Floyd's killing. And every time I hear the names, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. And then I think those are all names from across the country. You know I'm troubled because I also hear the name Ryan Stokes, Terrence Bridges, Cameron Lamb, Donnie Sanders, Ryan Stokes, Kansas City, Terrence Bridges, Kansas City, Cameron Lamb, Kansas City, Donnie Sanders, Kansas City, Terrence, Cameron, Donnie, all killed by KC, Missouri Police Department within the last 11 months. 3 Black men killed, no consequence. So that's troubling for me. So, but I had to dig deep. And so I went to a scripture this morning, and it says, it's 2 Timothy 1st chapter 7th verse. It says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline." That's where I got the strength and the courage to stand here and speak truth to power about the change that we must see. We must be fearless. We can't be shy about speaking up. And I'm calling out my white brothers and my white sisters, because the time is now for you to speak up, for you to speak with power and then act with your power. We must sow love so that we can reap a harvest of justice. And to our protesters, I say, fear not. Use your voice. Exercise your self-discipline in your fight for justice, but use your voice. Do not be deterred until we see the change that is necessary for us to move forward. The time has come. The time for change is now. Our city, our nation, and the globe has reached a tipping point. And if we don't act now, we will not survive this crisis as a nation. We must act now. So when we talk about love, we also need to help this to get us to a place where we can forgive, where we can overcome, and that we can build trust again. That's something called reconciliation. And when you get into dealing with race and discrimination and injustices, you also have to be able to find a place of love and of forgiveness and of reconciliation. But now we have to do this hard work, this heavy lifting. And we've got to change these policies and these procedures and these practices that have suppressed and oppressed Black people for more than 450 years. So we are in a crisis, and that's what calls for the best of us to step up to solve these problems. So what I want to do is get into the statement. And I'm going to screen share. Can everyone see my screen? So,
Yes, we can.
I'm trying to get to my show. There we go. Okay, so before I talk about this slide, I want to, yesterday, Mayor Lucas held a press conference along with Chief Smith. And in the course of that press conference, Mayor Lucas stated that he was pleased with Chief Smith's performance. And as I listened, it really struck a chord, because I was not sure I understood on what he based that declaration of confidence in Chief Smith. Because from our vantage point, we have a very different perspective on Chief Smith. We have no confidence in his commitment, in his competency, or in his compassion, or his ability to lead this police force where we need to go. So in the wake of the recent homicides of African-American men and excessive force at the hands of police in Kansas City, we believe that Chief Smith's abuse of power and the Board of Police Commissioners' complicity in obstructing justice, that the time has come for sweeping structural reforms within the Kansas City Police Department. So for the last 7 months, as I stated, after conducting our due diligence, we've arrived at the conclusion that a change in leadership at KCPD and a return to local control of the police department is required We have no confidence in his commitment to accountability and transparency. And if you take a look at this first slide, you see the data that comes from the mappingpoliceviolence.org website. This organization does research and maps police violence across the country. Where you live matters. Kansas City ranks 14 on a list of 100 police departments that kill Black men at higher rates than the US murder rate. KCPD kills Blacks at a rate of 4.5 times higher than whites. And if you look at our local data, you see the solve rate within KCPD is at 33%. The national average in 2014 was at 60.7%. Only 2 in 10 violent crimes are submitted to the prosecutor's office. Only 1 in 10 of all crimes are submitted for prosecution. The solve rate is abysmal. So why a change in leadership? The lack of commitment, competency, and compassion. We do not believe he's committed to reform. We believe that Chief Smith is more committed to protecting the blue line of the police department than protecting the community, the people that they are supposed to protect and serve. We believe that he lacks the competency required to implement and execute structural police reforms. And we believe that he lacks the compassion for the humanity of Black people. And this plays out in facts, not rhetoric. His recent refusal to issue probable cause statements, his blatant refusal to issue standard probable cause statements in excessive use of force cases and homicide cases involving police officers under his command. This tactic obstructs justice and erodes the public trust. We expect the police department to issue probable cause statements when requested and in alignment with standard operating procedures in all cases. Not just us, not just people. He has established a 2-tiered system of justice with a different set of accountabilities for his police officers and a different set of accountability for common citizens, for civilians. Chief Smith's consistent practice of conducting internal investigations of officer-involved homicides and excessive use of force cases, rather than calling for independent investigations. This practice raises concerns about cronyism and cover-ups. We expect the Kansas City Police Department to engage an outside law enforcement agency to conduct independent investigations into officer-involved use of force. Chief Smith's decision to appoint a former supervisor of one of the detectives involved in the December 2019 homicide of an African-American male as the lead investigator, and then withholding this information from the prosecuting attorney. So I don't know how Mayor Lucas got to a Chief Smith is doing a great job assessment, because I can't see any data to support that position. Reinstating officers to active duty while investigations into their roles in excessive use of force and homicide cases are ongoing. Investing a homicide victim prior to completing the investigation into the homicide case. In this December 2019 homicide of a young African-American male, before submitting the concluded evidence in that case, Chief Smith directed his officers to conduct an investigation on a dead man. Being more committed to protecting the blue line than protecting civilians, as I stated earlier. Those are problems. Those erode the trust of the community. And then let me just say something here that's not on the slide that's also problematic, because we talked about changes in leadership and we want changes in structure because we believe in local control. The Board of Police Commissioners behaves as if they were appointed by the governor to protect and serve the police chief and police officers, rather than to ensure that the department is committed to fair and impartial public safety strategies, dedicated to the principles of fairness, equity, and accountability, and working actively to build bridges that lead to substantial change. Approximately 70% of the city's operating budget is allocated to public safety, with over $250 million dedicated to the police department. Yet, the city of Kansas City, Missouri has no authority over KCPD decisions, policies, practices, and procedures. Kansas City is the only city in the nation that does not have local control of its police department. We expect to have a voice in the public institutions that are funded with tax dollars. We support local control. Now, we know that this evening, the mayor and I believe Chief Smith will be participating in a unity march, and we think that is great as it relates to symbolism, symbolic gestures. But when they get done with that march, what I want them to do, come Thursday morning, march right on up into that boardroom and start changing these policies. Do the real work. Get down and look at these excessive force policies and procedures that we don't know what they are because they're not transparent. When we asked to see policies and procedures, the chief sent us on a wild goose chase that ended up nowhere. The next thing that we want to do is offer what we consider to be important reforms. Procedural justice. We want fairness in processes. We want transparency in actions. We want an opportunity for voice, and we want impartial decision-making. How does that play out? Widespread use of body cams, review and revision of police use of deadly force policies, comprehensive retraining of all police officers, appointment of special prosecutors to investigate police misconduct, mandatory uniform FBI reporting and audit of lethal force incidents involving law enforcement. And just think about, let me just speak on this. Yesterday, Mayor Lucas praised Chief Smith. Then I pick up my paper and read this morning after watching a video go viral, globally viral, of KCPD officers pepper spraying one of the protesters who was doing nothing more than talking to him, shouting at him, lifting his voice in protest, and the officers sprayed him. And this morning in the paper, Chief Smith defended those officers. And we are on, on CNN, Don Lemon show. I saw it in the news cycle this morning. It's everywhere. But according to our mayor, Chief Smith's doing a fabulous job. Then, we need to dismantle and recreate the Office of Community Complaints. It needs a complete freaking overhaul. We held a community forum back in March. As we were preparing and doing our due diligence, we opened up to hear from the community. We were doing our research and doing our data gathering, but we asked people to come and tell us. Merrill Bennigan showed up, and we give him, props for doing that. But when he got there and they found out that he was there, the community lit him up about the concerns that they have about the Office of Community Complaints. And he is not empowered to fix the problem. The Board of Police Commissioners is empowered to fix that problem. They should show up in the meetings and stop putting Merrill out there on the front lines. But more importantly, they should get in that boardroom and review those policies with the community and come out with something that is transparent, something that holds officers accountable for infractions, and that we know what is going on when they do make those decisions. We also want comprehensive anti-racial profiling laws. The city of Kansas City, Missouri can pass ordinances, and the state should do the same. But one thing I would say, if I were on the city council, I'm not gonna run, don't get scared, I'm not gonna run. But if I were on the city council, I would certainly be taking a look at that city budget. And if I'm spending $250 million on something, I'm gonna make sure I find a way to have a voice. And that voice ought to be one that says, until you get these things in order, we're going to withhold this from your budget. Somebody, because they'll probably listen then. They haven't been listening to community cries for change. So then I'm going to stop here and pass it over to Laura McDonald. Hey,
everyone. I'm not so great with the mute button, as you all know, and I have much to say. So here we go. Laura McDonald, everyone, Executive Director of Metro Organization for Racial and Economic Equity. I have a statement to share with you from my organization. We've been at MORE2 pushing for police reform now for 5.5 years, when our very own member of Zion Grove Missionary Baptist Church, Ryan Stokes, was at the hands of a Kansas City police officer. So that's what brought us into this fight. We have witnessed, we've done all the things that King talks about in a letter from a Birmingham jail. You know, we marched, we had meetings, we negotiated, we thought we made progress, and then we got a new chief. What Kansas City's been witnessing since this past weekend, these egregious violations that we've been seeing happening, especially in plaza area protests, like my friend Terrence Maddox that was taken down, as Gwen Grant just described. Terrence Maddox is a former Wyandotte County Commissioner. And we saw him tackled and taken down and pepper sprayed because he's angry. And that makes me angry. He's a father. He's a husband, and he works with children who saw the police tackle him for exercising free speech. I know that my friend Sydney, her boyfriend Sean, lost his left eye when he was trying to help her they went to the exact area where KCPD sent the protesters. They went to that exact area, and then his eye was shot with a rubber bullet, and he lost his left eye this weekend. A white guy. Okay, so it's happening to all of us now, right? We know that a young couple, teenagers who were blocks away from the protest, had a police car literally pull over as this interracial couple was walking hand in hand and get out and pepper spray them in the face. And a witness pulled over behind them. They've contacted my organization and they're terrified to go public because the police assaulted a teenage couple who had just exercised free speech. Do you understand that? It's serious. And we have a police chief that had the audacity to defend those actions in front of the whole world today. We should be ashamed of that. We should be ashamed of that. This is America. And so now you all are seeing the things that we've been seeing and hearing, the names that Gwen Grant mentioned, and all the more. I know 6 mothers who have lost their children in this community to KCPD. 6 mothers who don't have answers. And 6 mothers that 5 of them will file a lawsuit. 1 of them gave up, but that will cost us money. If you don't care about anything else, do you care about the money? The money that could be spent on body cams. Do you care about the money? Because there's a pattern. There's a pattern with this department. And there's a pattern of I don't care, I believe my officers. There's 2 pandemics going on right now, and you're seeing protesters put their lives on the line, openly exposing themselves to one pandemic because of the pandemic of racism in this community. That's what you're witnessing. And you're witnessing a chief of police who is defending his officers who are taking down protesters, just as he has defended his officers who shot innocent people, unarmed people, or people with registered weapons. It's unacceptable. Unfortunately, none of this is news to us. Kansas City Police Department has killed 4 or 5 people a year for the last 15 years that we've looked at data. The Kansas City Star reported this to us all 5 years ago. And one of the most startling things that they said in that article was a single sentence. There are 12 or more officers on the current Kansas City Police Department who have killed 2 or more people when they looked at 45 homicides. I call them homicides, even if the police do not. 45. There is no such thing as justifiable homicide, if you ask me, but 45 homicides, not one indictment, and 12 officers committed at least 25 of those. Think about that and what that means in terms of our leadership. And we know that that pattern is continuing and perhaps getting worse under our current chief. Here's a little bit more about that. We saw in recent weeks an indictment of two decorated officers with Kansas City Police Department who brutalized a transgender person. And my friend Troy Robertson has been screaming about these two officers for years while they were getting medals, that they assaulted him. And no one believed him because of some misdemeanor charges he had. We know that there were two officers who shot, paralyzed one guy and shot another guy some 14 times that cost us over $1 million. And they both probably should have just been arrested, right? Probably they both should have been arrested, but instead it cost us millions of dollars. Why? Because they did something wrong. Those settlements happen when wrongness happens. At that level, over $1 million a piece. Multi-million dollars. We know that another set of two officers in Northeast Kansas City just a few years ago cost us some $700,000 in a 24-hour period because two different people were assaulted while in handcuffs by the same two officers in one day. One was a bystander and got to stay on the department until it was reported by the Kansas City Star. This is a pattern. This is a pattern, and it has not gotten better. It's gotten worse, and we have a chief who is not pretending to even care, not even pretending to care. And we did our work. We asked the chief. We met with the chief. We said to the chief, why? We asked him why. Why are you putting officers back to work in 9 days? Cameron Lamb's killers were back on the beat in 9 days, not desk duty. He told us flippantly in Gwen Grant's office, yes, that's my discretion. And I said, would that not make you look really bad if Gene Peters Baker returns an indictment on one of them when the investigation is not complete? And now yesterday, he is telling you, the press, that it is protocol. I read this in a Kansas City Star story, I think yesterday, that it's protocol for an officer to stay home after a shooting or be off after a shooting, which is the complete opposite of what he told us. He says what's expedient in the moment without a regard for facts or truth. He's never mentioned this protocol to us, nor has he followed it, because we know Cameron Lamb's investigation per his department is also not complete yet. And Cameron Lamb's, the people who shot and killed Cameron Lamb have been back on patrol since December 13th. Per the police, they told us this. One more thing that we really brought to the feet of the chief that I just have to lay out is there's a PR person who we asked him to take a serious look at. This PR person, without hesitation, when somebody asks about on Twitter or Facebook, brings up and tags KCPD in officer-involved shooting situations. Multiple times, people have shared with me screenshots where that person, whoever they are, is mentioning black on black crime. Now, we all know that to be a racist statement, but also think about what Gwen Grant said. The closure rate's like 33%. How do you know who committed the crime? And why are you bringing that up? Can the citizens not be concerned about all murders? And why do you specifically bring that up to Black people? So we read these tweets to the chief. We read these Facebook posts. And guess what? They're still doing it in the wake of this pandemic of racism. They're still doing it. These things are egregious, you all. So yes, we want local control. We want local control because the people, we can't unseat a governor in Jeff City. Kansas City can't do that. There's nowhere for us to escalate to while the police are escalating on protesters. Do you understand that? We can't take this to the feet of the governor because then what? The buck stops there for us. We can't. So yes, we need local control of this police department. We don't need a crazy model. We need each council district to have representation. Speaking of, over the past 17 years, just to give you some stats about KCP, the 17 appointees over the past few years, we mapped where they lived. 17 appointees, and 9 of them are from the Brookside Plaza area, according to my research. It's hard to find. 1 has been appointed twice. 3 have been African American men, 1 Latino. And then geographically, 2 have been from the Northland, 1 of those appointed twice. And from the whole area, from Troost to 435, all the way north to the city limits through Clay County, and all the way south to the 470 loop. That's a big area, and that's the area where the police spend the most of their resources and time. We've had exactly 1 representative in the past 15 years appointed by a governor, Republican and Democrat. That's a fact. So I have so much more to say. There's protesters in jail right now, and it's a pandemic. We want you to release the protesters. We want you to see to it that the protesters get released. If you're a person watching this and you have that within your power, you're exposing them to COVID-19 for exercising free speech. We want you to do that, and I'm adding that now to More Squared's list of demands at the request of my members this morning. So, yeah, we don't have confidence that the people of this community who are facing the most policing are being fairly represented. I just want to lift up the names of the mothers who might be watching and the family members who might be watching. So I want to say hello to Yo Sanders, Donnie Sanders' sister. I want to say hello, we love you, to Lori Bay, Cameron Lamb's mom. We want to say we love you to Jana Fulkerson, whose daughter Ashley was killed. We want to say the name Retanya McGee. Peaches, you didn't have to deserve this. It's not okay. Your son moved here from Chicago to escape violence, and he was killed by our police department without a command, according to witnesses, not 1 command. Terrence may have not even known that an officer was walking behind him. And media, oh, let me not forget Naireen Stokes, who's been with us the longest, who still hasn't gotten any form of real justice for Ryan, who was unarmed, and we all know it. And let me say to Nasha Green, the cousin of Dante Franklin, because his mom is so ripped up she can't even talk to us, let me say we love you and we're glad you keep standing with us. So we're sorry to all the family members that we didn't fix this before, but we're fixing it now. We're gonna fix it now. We need you guys to help us see it through. And I'm gonna turn this over to Reverend Williams. Thank you.
Rodney, you're up.
Yes. I'm going to read a statement from the NAACP. I'm Rodney Williams, pastor of the Salt Parkway United Christian Church and president of the Kansas City, Missouri branch of the NAACP. And I would like to first start out by quoting James Baldwin. And he says these words: "It is certain in any case that ignorance allied with power is the most ferocious enemy injustice can have. The Kansas City, Missouri branch of the NAACP is here in response to the killing of George Floyd and the aftermath across the country, especially here in Kansas City, Missouri. The urgency of the moment is yet another direct attack on the humanity of people in the African American community. The impact of oppression, particularly in the form of modern day lynching, supported by an injustice system that has festered in this country for far too long. Multifaceted repeats experiences of racism, bigotry, Violence against Black people has triggered the boiling point expressed in peaceful demonstrations across the land. Frustration, hopelessness has caused unacceptable behavior by a minority of protesters. Coward exploitations of the response to George Floyd's death by outsiders has contributed to violence and destruction. The murders of George Floyd and others, too numerous for us to mention, coupled with the lack of accountability by police departments, has set in motion what can be described as a moment of reckoning for our nation's consciousness. At the local level, it is especially a moment of reckoning for the Kansas City Police Department. It is crystal clear that the residents of Kansas City, Missouri, will bring an end to the criminalization of Black skin. We will hold our police department accountable for their consistent role in terrorizing our community for years. We must have total and a complete resets of policies so that no Black person living in Kansas City will ever experience unequal protection under the law in this city. To ensure our survival as free Black people, we must have fair and equal treatment under the law, just like all other citizens. All across America, and Gwen and Laura has lifted up these names, but all across America, communities have mourned the deaths of Trayvon Martin, Eric Gardner, Sandra Bland, Michael Brown. But right here in Kansas City, I'm gonna say their names again. We still are mourning Ryan Stokes, Terrence Bridges, Cameron Lamb, Donnie Saunders, and many others. And the ugly urgency of this moment is both a civil rights issue and a human rights issue that America must stand up and face squarely. But we must start right here in our own backyard in Kansas City, Missouri. The Kansas City, Missouri branch of the NAACP stands and advocates for protection under the law. The Kansas City, Missouri branch stands against state control for the Kansas City Police Department. The Kansas City, Missouri branch of the NAACP stands with the community for local control over our local police department. The Kansas City, Missouri branch of the NAACP demands a zero tolerance approach in penalizing or prosecuting police officers who have killed unarmed, nonviolent, non-resistant individuals during arrests. We must have legislation that includes the following: a ban on the use of deadly force, especially knee holds and choke holds, as acceptable practices for police officers. The Kansas City Police Department must enforce an open records policy that will ensure misconduct and information and disciplinary histories of all of the employees are not shielded from public record. Recertification of credentials of police officers will be denied when it is determined that their use of deadly force was unwarranted by federal guidelines. We want implementation of citizen review boards to hold departments accountable and to build police public confidence. We want body cameras on all officers, and we want them turned on at all times. We want the restructuring of the Office of Community Complaints to make it an independent office of the police department. We want reasonable people in all of our communities. We want to assure them, even though you're angry and sad and in pain, we must be strategic and measured in our response as we work to realize solutions in the battle against injustice. The NAACP started out fighting against a particular form of Southern justice. Lynchings and murders of Black men for no reason other than they were Black. The NAACP's first major campaign was to stop lynching. And the only reason that they won that campaign is because they had the mitigated gall and the nerve to take the moral issue of lynching to the public square. So our branch stands with this community to take this immoral, irresponsible actions of police departments. But here our concern is Kansas City, we stand with you to take them to the public square and speak truth to power. That concludes my statement.
Okay, can you go back to the, so now we're going to open up for questions from the media. Tiara, could you go out of spotlight, please?
You should be out of spotlight. Everyone should be able to say. Yeah.
Right.
So what we're gonna do
Yeah.
is we'll have Glenn acknowledge you, and then Eric or myself will unmute you. So please recognize Glenn and don't unmute yourself until she recognizes you.
And let's go with Glenn Rice. It's hard, I can't see when you have them in the full screen, Tiara. I need for me to recognize them. I need you to go back and take the spotlight.
I took it off of spotlight. Everyone should be able to see each other.
Why now? Why not wait till everything's kind of cooled down? What is the sense of urgency to call for his resignation at this point?
Okay, I guess that sounds like maybe you want me to go back and repeat all of those facts we just
No.
listed.
No.
I mean, the reason for the urgency at this point is that we have reached a tipping point in this country. We do not want to find ourselves at the state of unrest that we have witnessed in Minneapolis, that we're witnessing in other cities across the country, where the looting and the burning and the violence is taking hold because people have been suppressed and oppressed for too long. They're angry. And so if we don't do something now, if we don't make fundamental changes in policies, practices, and procedures now, then these people are not going to go away to stay. These young people who are out there protesting now, they're hurt, they're angry, they're suffering. And you do that on top of a pandemic. As Laura said, we have two viruses, two insidious illnesses plaguing this community. And we need change, we need healing, and we need that to be measurable, actionable changes in how the police department conducts its business. And we don't believe we can get there with this leader. That's why now. That's the urgency of now. Now is the time to act.
Hey, Gwen, how are you?
I'm good, Eric, and yourself?
I'm fine. This is an outstanding job, and I commend you all for your research and the data that you shared, but I have a question. Is it feasible, and one of the demands that you have is for the local control and maybe an oversight board, within the police department's contract with the union, is it feasible or doable to have an oversight review board?
Excellent question. I know Laura's done some work on this. I'll respond, and then she can go ahead and respond as well, which is something that in order for us to address many of the changes we're talking about, we're going to have to deal with the FOP. Mm-hmm. And the way we get to that is with accountability at City Hall, 414 East 12th Street. And when the time comes to renegotiate that bargaining contract, that we are negotiating that contract and not a board, a police board, and where we only have one seat. You know, it's, you know, for the mayor to be out talking and everything about the chief, he has one vote down there. He's not running anything down there, but he's just writing a check. So we need to get control of what's happening down there through that bargaining agreement. That's an excellent question, Eric, and that's what needs to happen. Laura, do you want to add to that?
I think you covered.
Okay. Next question, please.
Mike Mahoney.
Hey,
Yeah,
Mike, I knew when you were going to ask a question or two.
I talked with a gentleman that was on the Ferguson review board today, and you're talking a great deal about local control. He said local control is not the panacea, that it needs, there are many other things, and you are calling for other things, but that local control is not it, the be all end all. In fact, St. Louis, they're not real happy with how their police department is, even with local control.
So I'd like to take that question.
Go ahead, Laura.
Number one, you do know that we're the only city remaining in the United States of America that's under this type of a model of a governor-controlled board. So just because St. Louis does not get it right doesn't mean that we will get it wrong, right? We want to spread power out throughout. You heard what I said, Mike Mahoney. There's been 9 people in Brookside and Plaza area in 17 years appointed to this board. There is not equal representation. If I were the people in the 3rd district, I'd be suing for taxation without representation. You know, there is not equal representation in this city. So what St. Louis did is what St. Louis did. They do things different. We don't even call beverages the same thing in St. Louis and Kansas City. We're 2 different cities. So that's to me irrelevant. What I will say is this: when we went to Sly James, when he was the mayor, we went to Leland Shuren when he was on the Board of Police Commissioners, and we went to Mr. Alvin Brooks. All 3 of them told us that while they agreed with our changes, they didn't feel they had the power as a Board of Police Commission to make it. And you could certainly check with them on where they are on this issue now. But we tried to get the civilian review process set up, and they said sans local control, they probably couldn't do it statutorily. Those are attorneys, right?
Eric, I'm sorry, Rodney.
Yeah, I'd like to weigh in on that. I think that local control can be successful if we have a diversity of people on those boards. Secondly, although I believe that we need to have local control, I think Mike is right. It's not the panacea. What needs to happen, what our protesters are doing, they're actually changing the consciousness of America. And so no matter what we institute, we also simultaneously must work on changing the thought processes of those in power and for the people on the street of America. If we could change the consciousness of America, a lot of things that might not work will work.
And then I will just add one final piece to that, and that is systems change is a process, and it's difficult. And you don't shy away from it because it's going to be difficult. You have to lean into it. These systems were built over time to get where they are. So it's going to take a lot more than a year or 2 of having local control to see the benefits and the results that you want to see in the longer term. And so the expectation that, oh, now we got local control, everything's going to be different, makes no sense whatsoever. It's like turning on a faucet and expecting hot water to come out. You turn it on hot, and hot water's not going to immediately come out. It's going to take a minute.
Gwen, real quick,
Yeah.
real quick, just so I understand, are you asking for the chief to resign, or are you asking for the mayor to fire him?
Well, we know the mayor can't fire him. The board has to.
Or the board? Are you asking for him to resign or for his dismissal?
It says we would like to see him resign, a change in leadership, but the reality is the end result we want is Chief Smith gone. How they figure that out is up to them. We want him out of the way so that we can make room for progress.
Gwen, has anybody, and one of the things that me and my adversarial friend Laura McDonald have discussed is the city council has control because they control the budget. And I think that's like 40% of the budget is given to them by law, but they give them these other parts of the budget that's not required by state statute. So has there been any discussion with the city council to say, look, set some benchmarks. If you all meet this goal, then we'll release this much money to you. But has anybody had that conversation with the city council members?
I had that conversation this morning with Councilwoman Shields, and I agree with her on that approach. I think she had some challenges getting other council members on board with that approach. But one thing you have in a situation like this is the power of the purse, and they ought to be used until we get full control. There are ways that they can use it. You're absolutely right. And I think they should.
All right, your next question is from Angie from KCTV5.
Thank you. And if you guys could give me 2 questions, I would really appreciate it. One is on behalf of another reporter, and she wants it for Gwen. She would like Gwen to address what the average person can do. So Gwen, whenever you want to take that question. But also my question for you guys first, I know you're mentioning a lot of things you'd like to see: body cameras, local control, and you want to see Chief Smith gone. What is the most important of all of those?
Body cameras. Right now, body cameras. I don't know that it's even a fair question to say that we got to like prioritize those, because one, that's kind of a collective problem. I really think that, if I were to go back and think about it, I'd probably say I want Chief Smith gone first, because he's in the way of body cameras and every other reform strategy that we need to execute. So I'd probably go that route, but that's just me. Other people need to speak up and share on this issue.
Yeah, I would say
Given that we have it requires a statutory change, probably to get local control. That's a long process. And do we ride that out for, a chief or body cams? We should not, right? So we should be plowing ahead with all 3.
yeah, I agree. It has to be an and both.
Yeah, we don't either or questions. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's fair. And then could you address what you feel like is something the average person can do at home to help facilitate all of this change? And that's from Casey Jones.
Okay, and that was for me.
Yes, please.
Question. Sure. So the average person can start by paying attention to what's going on, watching the news, looking into the issues, holding your elected officials accountable, showing up at Board of Police Commissioners meetings and speaking your voice, getting involved with Urban League and Moore Square and NAACP as we do this work. We welcome engagement. Show up, because when we're here on behalf of the community, we're not here just talking about on our own for ourselves, for our own self-interest. We're here to represent the people. That's what our organizations do. We're here to serve you. So let us know how we can help you, but get involved, get engaged. You don't have to sit at home. Pick up the phone and call your elected officials, send them an email. They do pay attention to those. A good case in point is Councilwoman Melissa Robinson hosted a virtual town hall last night because she was flooded with emails and phone calls about people who want to see change, who want to see reform, who want to see policies done, law enforcement held accountable. They want to see more transparency in law enforcement. So that's how you make your voice heard.
Thank you.
There's a
There
question
is
in the
one
chat.
question in the chat, and I think one of you all addressed it briefly, but the question is there an expected timeline for the presented demands to be met?
No, we just wanted today the first thing was to get it out here. What we would love to have happen now is that we sit down with the Board of Police Commissioners, with the city council members, and we start planning a pathway forward. What do we do? What can the city council do? How can they better manage that budget to hold the police department accountable? Let's sit down with the Board of Police Commissioners and start talking about strategies for dismantling and rebuilding the Office of Community Complaints. Let's sit down and talk about all of the policies to address excessive use of force. Let's sit down and talk about how you change your image and you build trust in the community so that you can have a better solve rate. Because I'm not talking to somebody who obstructs me, who suppresses me, who does not respect the humanity of me and my community. I'm not helping you solve crime. You wonder why your solve rate's low? You have no real, credible, authentic relationship with the community. People do not help the police solve crimes. They go out and handle the business themselves when they don't trust law enforcement. So we need to sit down. We need to work this out. We need to build bridges of communication, of reconciliation, of trust. But that only comes with accountability and transparency. That doesn't come in a two-tiered system. It comes with equal justice, equal respect, equal opportunity, and equal voice, and power distributed across this community.
That was the only question in the chat.
If there are no other questions from media, any comments from the group or any media questions anymore?
I do see one more. This is from Adam Hawley. There's a group of citizens talking about promoting the ACLU's mobile recording app with a marketing campaign. Officer, I'm going to record this interaction. I'm pulling my phone out now. Is this a good idea?
Yes. And you know, we just, today, there was an ordinance that was passed out of the, one of those committees, I forget which committee, that's with the recommendation do pass at the city council meeting tomorrow, an ordinance that was sponsored by Councilwoman Shields and Raina Park Shaw to address another problem with the KC Police Department. In the case of Breonna, this was Breonna Hill, ours is Breonna Hill, right? Yeah, the case of Breonna Hill, where the police, 2 officers were charged with misdemeanors for slamming Breonna's head down and putting their knee on her, and a witness, a onlooker recorded that. And that's how we found out, and they were ultimately prosecuted because the police department had that information and never shared it. But KCTV, I think, no, the Star, somebody placed it on the air, and the video was discovered. We also learned that the police arrested this man when he took the video. He was arrested, charged, and convicted for taking the video of the police in this particular case. That's unconscionable. So yeah, we need laws to protect citizens for trying to help out, you know, and to protect, promote transparency. And so the ordinance was recommended for due pass. It will be voted on tomorrow, and I hope that it should pass unanimously. But it's still kind of weak because if the person steps off the curb into the street to take the recording, then that's a violation. So they still need to do more work on that. Mm-hmm. Because if the police don't want to wear body cam, put some body cams on. You want to obstruct people from being able to take pictures, and put some body cams on. And then, you know, so yeah, that's a good thing, and we want to encourage it. And I believe the prosecuting attorney's office would welcome it because it strengthens their ability to prosecute crime, be it crimes committed by police or crimes committed by civilians. We need evidence. Without evidence in George Floyd, where would we be? Without Antoine Arbery, without video? Yeah, we want video, and people, we encourage you to do it. Any other questions in the chat?
This question is from Justin Stein. Are there ways other organizations can support the demands put forth at this coalition?
Justin is my friend with Jobs with Justice. We would love to have you come in and join us, Jobs with Justice, and anybody else.
Everybody.
Now, and I would like to just echo that as well. Yes, we need the more.
Justin and I, you know, that's another issue I'll throw in here we got to pay attention to, folks, is this, the Missouri legislature. We got to fight to try to save clean Missouri, where you had a clear mandate from the electorate that for the Clean Missouri bill, and then they passed the legislation to try to overturn that. And we worked with Jobs with Justice and a number of organizations on that, and we'll be dealing with that yet again, I think, next week. Thanks, Justin, for joining us today. Anyone else?
There is one more question in the questions, but I think you sort of addressed it, and one more just came in. So 2 questions. One you all have addressed shortly, but I'll read it anyway. Many are afraid to start recording when interacting because of escalation of police. Is that a concern?
I would say yes. And the reason I say yes is a concern because whenever you're stopping someone from, I would say that'd be under freedom of the speech, just being able to look at and record and to share with all others the injustices that's taking place. So we need all kinds of recordings. And yeah.
I think it's less concern when you're Caucasian to do the recording, and so we do that. That's a way that, to answer Angie's friend's question, that we can also help, right? So it's less a risk for us to stop and record something, but yeah, you do put yourself a little bit at risk when you pull over, and we've seen people be arrested, their cell phones destroyed and all kinds of things. But again, that's a law violation. So we think you're always taking a risk with certain types of interactions of courage. And, you know, there probably should be some kind of training, as I think Dr. Hill was saying.
Okay, and the last question is, how does the community support these efforts? How do we help keep these conversations going so these vital concerns don't get lost?
So our Police Accountability Task Force, as I stated, we held a couple of community events right before COVID-19 hit, and we had to pull back. But it is our plan to conduct more of these conversations. In fact, Dr. Hill on our committee, Dr. Kokithia Hill, is working on planning a virtual town hall event. We're still, you know, recognizing the fact that there is a pandemic, two viruses. We got the race crisis and we still have the COVID-19 crisis, and that's impacting African Americans at disproportionate rates, higher rates than it is our white counterparts. And so we do want to make sure that when we're doing convenings, we're still keeping people safe from that disease. So we're working on a virtual, virtual town hall, so we can get, you know, a lot of people in the room and give space for voice, give opportunities to get engaged. And we need you to help us, you know, show up, and we're gonna reach out, and you'll be hearing more about that. Dr. Hill, would you like to say something about it or not? There you go, unmute.
Yeah, we just believe in the collective power of voices. We think the more folks that we have at the table to become involved and lend insight and influence creates a better Kansas City for all of us. We believe in the collective power of all of us. We look forward. We want you to be engaged. You know, I'm the vice chair of the Urban League, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that this work, while staffed by many of us volunteers, it also requires real dollars. And so we understand that many of you are leading several different hats, working for several different organizations. So if you could just donate $5, $10, $100 to the Urban League, to Laura McDonald's organization, More Square, CCO, you know, like this helps us be able to continue the work. So again, we thank you for taking the time to join us. We will definitely keep your contact and send you information about town halls. We welcome your insights and information, and we welcome an opportunity to serve with you. So again, join us and donate if you can. Thank you so much.
Is that it? Any other questions? I see one other chat there, Tiara, because we are like about 7 minutes past the hour. We can take, if there's a question, we can take it. And
okay.
then last question.
We can take the last question. It's kind of lengthy. In the case of George Floyd, there were officers that did not intervene with the brutality, and they have not been charged. If I were to commit a murder and had others with me, they would likely also be facing a murder charge. Currently, police officers are not held to the same laws. Are there any demands that officers be held to the same laws and penalties as the general public?
I think what's so interesting about that question is, you know, officers should be held to a higher standard, right, than the general public. And we're not seeing that anymore locally or across America. And that's part of what we're talking about today, is holding officers to a higher standard. So that question nailed it. In fact, if I'm with somebody and we commit a crime together and an officer shoots me, my accomplice can be charged with my murder, right? And so there are some really wild things that protect officers, and we've got to look at those FOP contracts, but we don't think that we can get there without local control.
One last point, just in terms of updating, the other officers in the case will be charged. The Attorney General made an announcement. There was a press conference just prior to our press conference today. The charges for the officer that had his knee on George Floyd's neck, the charge has been raised from 3rd degree to 2nd degree murder. It will be, and then the other 3 officers will be indicted. They didn't say, I didn't hear before we started what the charges would be, but it looks as if they will also be charged with the same crime. So, and that was the last question. Thanks to the partners in the Police Accountability Task Force. Thanks for your support. This has been hard work. We've had lots of meetings, this is hard work, a lot of time, and we appreciate everything that you've done to support this effort. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Reverend Williams. I always enjoy hearing you preach, my brother. Thank you, Dr. Hill, for doing your job very well as Vice Chair of the Urban Legal Board of Greater Kansas City. I couldn't have said that better myself. Glenn, other media, Channel 41, Cynthia, everyone who joined us today. We sincerely appreciate you. Go out there and do good for Kansas City. And we look forward to working with you, try to make things better. Have a great day. We're
Thank
out.
you.
Peace out.